There's another book coming out. Do you remember Stephanie Grisham? I had nothing but snotty things to say about Stephanie Grisham. She was the woman who was appointed press secretary after so many press secretaries before her just decided to quit to get the hell away from Trump. Not that they disapproved of Trump, but they left. But Stephanie Grisham has come out with a book. It's titled, I'll Take Your Questions Now. It hasn't been released yet. But there's some information in this book that is, again, just horrifying shit, horrifying stuff. It's unbelievable. I want to share a little bit of it with you. For example, at least the little bit that was released in the New York Times. For example, remember that 90-minute conversation between the Orange Vomit and Vladimir Putin in Osaka, Japan 2 years ago? 90-minute conversation. There were no interpreters there, supposedly, or only interpreters. Nobody taking notes. Nothing was just like the Helsinki meeting between these two scum. Journalists were rushed out of the room. At this meeting in Osaka, that was the Group of 20 summit meeting in 2019. But Stephanie Grisham found herself once again with a close-up view of what was going on. And she writes that she saw Trump lean toward Putin that day and tell him, quote, "Okay, I'm going to act a little tougher with you for a few minutes, but it's for the cameras. And after they leave, we'll talk. You understand?" End quote. This rotten son of a bitch, this cowardly lump of human waste, Donald Trump, whose persona that he puts out there when he has these filthy meetings with the scum, like he had down in Perry, Georgia last weekend, the facade that he puts out is not him. He's a cowardly little piece of shit. That's all he is. But that little incident is just one of the many telling interactions that are detailed by Grisham in her book. She is one of the most, she's described by the New York Times anyway, as one of the most senior and longest serving Trump advisors. She was the Orange Vomit's third press secretary. And she was Melania Trump's chief of staff and communications director before she resigned on January 6th during the Capitol riot. Now, her book, it's a 352-page book, according to the Times. It was obtained by the Washington Post and shared with, some of it was shared by, with the Times. But it shows a litany of wrong decisions and misdeeds and, in my opinion, crimes committed by the Orange Vomit, from oogling a young female staffer to orchestrating lies for the public to attempting to ban the news media from the White House compound. But in addition, Ms. Grisham's book also gives what the New York Times calls a rare firsthand look at Melania Trump, who craved her privacy, and a blow-by-blow of how she, Melania Trump, wound up wearing that jacket that said, "I really don't care. Do you?" Remember that? The intent behind the book is obvious. That's a quote from Melania Trump's office, and that's in a statement after a passage leaked comparing Melania Trump to Marie Antoinette. So, Melania Trump's office, it's a talking office, released a statement, quote, "The intent behind the book is obvious. It is an attempt to redeem herself after a poor performance as press secretary, failed personal relationships, and unprofessional behavior in the White House. Through mistruth and betrayal, Ms. Grisham seeks to gain relevance and money at the expense of Mrs. Trump." End quote. That's what the furniture and the walls and the ceiling of Melania Trump's office set. And in addition, the Orange Vomit responded to the book with a typical Orange Vomit statement that threw accusations back at Grisham. Quote, oh, and this comes from a Trump spokeswoman. What woman could possibly work around this filthy pig? But this is Liz Harrington. And this is what she said, quote, this book is another pitiful attempt to cash in on her president's strength. Oh, my God. And sell lies about the Trump family. Miss Grisham is a disgruntled former employee, and the publishers should be ashamed of themselves for preying on desperate people who see the short-term gain in writing a book full of lies, end quote. You see, this is what I've been saying for months about this scum bastard, Donald Trump, Donald Jesus Trump, to his followers. Once you are in for the big lie spawns all kinds of little lies that run around the big lie like little cockroaches just all over the place. And you have to make sure that all your little cockroaches are all on the same page, all saying the same thing in order to bolster the big lie. This has been the objective of this filthy goddamn former administration, Trump. And it's going to continue. And regarding of what Brother Dave said and what I said last week, it's going to continue till this son of a bitch keels over dead. And I hope I'm alive. I hope I'm still alive, because I will find out where he's buried and go urinate on his grave if I can get past whatever armed guard might be there. This man is just filthy, filthy, filthy. Now, if you remember the distinguishing characteristic of Stephanie Grisham, her distinguishing characteristic, you might say, was she never once held a news conference. She was the press secretary, never held a news conference. And she was often unresponsive when reporters would see her someplace and ask her a question, she would answer. And her former colleagues said that she was irregularly in the office during her last year in the White House. And, of course, she developed a coronavirus illness while serving as press secretary at the start of the pandemic. And that's when she was transitioning from being the press secretary to being Melania's chief of staff. But one thing to keep in mind is that this woman, Ms. Grisham, is undeniably one of the Trump originals. She was hassling with reporters on the campaign trail in 2016 before she worked her way into Trump's inner circle. And she's still considered by people in the media who understand how this shit works. She's still considered to be a consummate Trump insider. So this is not Bob Woodward. This is not Robert Costa. This is somebody who was inside, who knew what was going on, who saw it. Now, getting back to the beginning of this piece in the New York Times, in Miss Grisham's telling, the Russian Trump, or Trump may be the Russian Putin, I'm not sure, but Putin seemed to be attempting to confuse Trump when all this shit went down at Osaka. Grisham writes that Fiona Hill, remember her, the White House's top Russian advisor? She testified in one of the hearings against the Orange Vomit. But Fiona Hill told Grisham, that Putin brought to their meeting an unusually attractive female translator whose presence was absolutely designed to distract Trump. God. And they point out that Putin also seemed to be coughing and clearing his throat an inordinate number of times throughout the meeting. And Fiona Hill guessed and told this to Grisham, that he was probably trying to trigger Trump's germaphobe tendencies. I mean, of course, let's not forget who Putin is, an expert on distraction techniques. He was a KGB operative, one of the highest in the KGB. He knows how to do this shit. But aside from those types of anecdotes, a major theme of the book, and again, I'm taking this from the Washington Post and New York Times. I haven't read it. Nobody's read the whole thing yet, I don't think. But a major theme of the book is the culture of lies that was the Trump administration. Grisham writes this, quote, casual dishonesty filtered through the White House as if it were in the air conditioning system, end quote. Which means simply that every fucking body who worked under this filth lied about everything. For example, in 2019, Grisham writes this, that remember when Trump went to Walter Reed Medical Center without telling the media that he was going or why. And it was a days-long mystery in the national news. But Grisham's book says that the president went in for a simple colonoscopy without actually using the word. And she also added in her book that it was a very common procedure for which a patient is sometimes put under, and that George Bush had one as president too. So have I. I mean, hell yes, I've had a couple. And yeah, they either put you completely under general or they give you Versed, a drug that is at once a sedative and also interferes with your ability to remember, to put things into your memory banks. You can't remember anything. But as far as the elaborate concealment that Trump insisted on where it concerned his colonoscopy, Grisham writes that Trump didn't want to have Vice President Mike Pence in power even for a short period of time. And he didn't want to be, quote, the butt of a joke on late night television, end quote. Jesus Christ. Now, we know this, and this applies to the COVID-19 situation also, but Trump could have used the power of the presidency to demystify colonoscopies, to bring them front and center so that more people would get them, to prevent colon cancer and save lives. But Grisham writes this, quote, but as with COVID, he was too wrapped up in his own ego and his own delusions about his invincibility, end quote. His invincibility. Even Jesus didn't have that. Oh my God. Grisham also says that Trump didn't want to ban travel to China in the early days of the pandemic, despite the lies he put out later that he did want to. Grisham writes that, quote, the upcoming election influenced, that was the 2020 election, every decision Trump made about the pandemic, end quote. Absolutely. And as a result of that, we don't need Stephanie Grisham or anyone to tell us that hundreds of thousands of people in the United States are now dead because this murderous son of a bitch, this traitorous lump of human waste, Donald Trump, refused to use the power of his office to get the point across to Americans. But Grisham also writes that all these White House crises that we watched happen over and over and over and over again had as much to do with his incompetence as well as his filthy dishonesty. His incompetence and his dishonesty. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts.
As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.